You're listening to the Fierce Fatty Podcast, episode 187, DEI's Big Fat Problem, Fat Discrimination at Work. I'm your host, Vinnie Wellsby. Let's go.
Perfect.
Hello, welcome to this episode of Fierce Fatty Podcast. So glad that you're here. If you saw this episode come out and said, "Ooh, another monthly episode from Vinny, I'm excited," and you haven't already, consider donating on Ko-fi, K-O-F-I, which is kind of like Patreon. And you can do as little as $5 a month or a one-off donation. Because Ko-fi is what pays for the podcast. And the more donations that we get on Ko-fi, the more podcast episodes that we can get out for you. So yeah, I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's K-O-F-I, Fierce Fatty. Why the hell they don't pronounce it coffee when it's buy me a coffee? Honestly, they missed the mark with that. Maybe it's because it's from a different country, and in that country, coffee is pronounced Kofi. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe did I solve the problem? Is that what it is? Anyway, it seems strange to me. Hey, some news. This might be relevant for about 10% of you. Or maybe if you just want to know stuff about me, or maybe not. Maybe you just want to know stuff about fat stuff. That's why you're here. But in case you're interested in me, you're like, no, Vinny, shut up and start telling us about the fat stuff. I just got diagnosed with ADHD with autistic traits. And some exciting, and it's combined type. What is it? Hyperactive and inattentive. Yeah, so fun. And you know who helped me realize that I have ADHD? Asha from The Fat Doctor. Oh my goodness. If you are having any health concerns, Asha does sessions virtually, and I cannot even tell you how wonderful it was to speak to a doctor about health stuff and them be like, oh yeah, well that's because of this, and not blame it on your weight. It was just honestly so affirming. And I've been doing this stuff for years, right? But to have that relationship experience with Asha, he was just so fucking good. So listen, if you've got any type of health thing and you just want someone to be like, listen, this is what's going on, this is, decoding the anti-fat bullshit, then Asha is your guy. So anyway, Asha was like, oh, you have ADHD, right? Because I was just talking about, stuff that I was thinking and doing. And I was like, huh? What? No, I don't have ADHD, obviously. Because, what I thought about ADHD was that I don't have it, basically. Because I had said to Asha I could never, ever work in a, quote, real job ever again. There's no way that I could do that. And also I was talking about time stuff and how, because I'm an excessively on-time person. And I was like, well, that's not ADHD because I'm always on time. And I was thinking, yeah, I'm so on time because I'm so stressed about not being on time that if I have an appointment the next morning, all night my sleep will be ruined because I'll be thinking about the appointment and making sure that I get there. And then I'll be early for the appointment. And then, say it's an appointment online, then I'll be like, okay, well, I've got half an hour into the appointment, so I'll just look at some stuff online. And then next thing you know, it's like 1 minute to the appointment, I'll be like, oh shit, like where did that time go? Like what? I was early, what the heck? Anyway, that's just the one thing that Asha was like, sounds like ADHD. So in Canada, which is where I am, you can get on a wait list and get an assessment for free by the government. Well, not the government, but, a healthcare provider. But you can also do private, and private is $300, which apparently in the US, people are flabbergasted by how cheap it is. Maybe you should be calling our Canadian doctors and getting an assessment done that way, because apparently in other places and in Australia, it costs like $5,000 or something, which is bonkers. Why? Anyway, so the assessment, in case you're interested, skip ahead a few minutes if you're like, oh, no, I don't care about ADHD stuff. The assessment basically met a psychologist, psychiatrist, one of the two, one that doesn't do prescriptions but is a doctor. And I had a 90-minute conversation with her, just asking me about my life, basically my childhood and the things that I perceive as issues, like how do I perceive that ADHD might be affecting me. And the time from Asha saying, hey, do you have ADHD, to me having this appointment was probably a couple of months, because I was just mulling it over, being like, do I? And then writing a list on my phone of the potential symptoms. And I just kept adding it. And the symptoms became about maybe 60 things long. So I was like, okay. The more I learned about ADHD, the more I was like, oh, well, this is a symptom. Anyway, so the doctor asked about, so what are the things that I struggle with, and big thing for me is struggling to do a full day's work, because it's just so hard for me to do that because my brain is distracted, and as well too, so that's a huge thing, because that really limits my ability to work and make money, and the other one is that I struggle with future planning. And so making plans, connecting with friends. And so my friends are the types of people who will be like, Vinny, let's hang out. And I'll be like, fuck yeah, I'd love to do that. It's really hard for me to reach out to people and say, let's make a plan and let's do this thing in 2 weeks or whatever, because I'm living it just in the moment. I'm not living in the future or in the past. I'm just thinking, what should I do now? So always, like weekends, I get to the weekend and I'm like, oh, I've not made any plans. Boring. Unless a friend has forced plans upon me, and then I'm like, great. So anyway, I really want to get out of that, because, it's nice to have a friend who reaches out to you like me that doesn't do that. And my friends know, right? And it's not saying I never reach out to friends, because I do, but it's a real, mental energy taking thing when it shouldn't be. Anyway, those are the symptoms. They're the big things that really cause me distress. And then I did some online tests, and it was kind of like, play this puzzle and follow this dot around the screen. And some of the tests I scored really well on, like 100%. And some of the tests I scored very low on. Overall, my cognitive ability was something like 300 out of 800, which is the low side of normal, which has nothing to do with intelligence. It's more, how is your brain working, and what is it good at? What is it maybe not so good at? And so the thing that I really struggled with was remembering strings of numbers. So they'd be like, remember this number, 172948442, like that. And then I'd be like, 172, So apparently 10% of adults have undiagnosed ADHD. And apparently the psychologist who also specializes in gender affirmation, like writing reports so people can get gender affirmation surgery, she said that 50% of people who are genderqueer also are neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, whatever. And I was like, she said something like the similar thing that's happening in the brain with gender is something similar that's happening with neurodivergence. Well. So if you are a fellow genderqueer person, or if you're a human with a brain, or if you were a woman who also way less diagnosed, and you're an adult who way less diagnosed, 85% of adults who have ADHD are not diagnosed. I happen to have some Adderall in my medicine cupboard because I was given it by a doctor 12 years ago. I've no idea why. The psychologist was like, that's another sign that you're autistic, because I couldn't remember. And so I've been trying taking a low dose of Adderall, and, you know, it feels like I can hear for the first time. It feels like, it's only 5 milligrams, but it feels like, and it's 12 years old, so it's not less, probably less potent. Maybe it can kill me, who knows? But anyway, I ain't dead yet. You know when you're underwater and you can hear music, and you can still hear sound, but it doesn't sound right. And imagine you lived your whole life underwater, and you're like, that's how sound sounds. It feels like I've taken my head out of the water, and now I can see and hear clearly, and it's not all so muddled. And I didn't know that my head was metaphorically underwater, and it just feels like calm. It's almost like you don't know the way that you're feeling in your brain is not normal until you get a medication that makes it different, and you're like, shit, this is what, quote, normal brains feel like. What? You're just walking around just with a brain that clear? What? You weirdos. Yeah. So I have just got a blood test and checked my heart today because there's stimulant medication. ADHD is stimulant medication, so you need to make sure that your heart is good and everything else is good. So then I'm going to start this time next week on proper medication, and then you kind of ramp it up. So yeah, next podcast I'll tell you how I'm feeling. If it works, if it doesn't work, whatever, blah, 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 bloop, bloop. If it makes me feel better, I know with my at-home experimentation, it's so far has helped. And I'm just taking it random, like one, if I've got a busy day, of this low dose of Adderall. Anyway, yeah. So if you're thinking like, I think I could be ADHD, maybe keep a list on your phone. And when you see some ADHD meme or something, and you're like, everyone does that. Do they? Because I was thinking, whoa, I do that, and I'm not neurodivergent. Yeah, it was a clue that I am neurodivergent. Hey, did you know? So that's the end of the ADHD stuff, by the way. ADHD is probably why I'm good at just talking to myself on a podcast, right? Who knows what amazing things I can do because of ADHD. So we're talking about DEI's big fat problem. Did you know that I have a consulting side of my business called Weight Inclusive Consulting, where I teach humans, businesses, companies, teams about size inclusion. Well, if you didn't know, now you do. Weight Inclusive Consulting. The URL for my website is weightbiastraining.com. I'm changing that. I just bought Weight Inclusive Consulting. I'm like, why did I not make the fucking URL Weight Inclusive Consulting if my business is called Weight Inclusive Consulting? I think I did research, and weight bias training was like a top hit on what people actually Google. So anyway, I'm going to keep that URL in the background. So anyway, Weight Inclusive Consulting. I've not done it yet. So now I've told you I'm going to have to do it in the next week. And something that I see, because I'm talking to DEI people. So by the way, if you don't know what DEI is diversity, equity and inclusion. And the big companies will have a DEI team. Medium companies might have one DEI person. Smaller companies might bring in consultants, and a lot of companies do nothing. But there has been a big push in recent years after George Floyd's murder to address DEI, whether it's really actually address it or just look like they're addressing it. Who knows? But anyway, it's been a topic for a number of years, and DEI consultants and education has been around since the 1960s. Anyway, the big issue that I see is that anti-fat bias is almost never seen as something that's a priority for diversity training. So I did an experiment where I messaged hundreds of people on LinkedIn in the DEI world. And my message was just a quick question. Have you ever come across anti-fat bias training or any training to do with size diversity? Guess how many people said that they had? And I also I did a survey on my Instagram stories. I have 50,000 followers. I think 50 something. Guess how many people said yes? 0. No. Up until that point, actually the day after, I had someone saying, yes, I ran a training. And I was like, what? Amazing. Unfortunately, they said, what they told me about the training, I was like, they were in a straight size body. And I was like, no, that's fucked up, man. Because they were saying, yeah, we talk about the extremes of body size, from really small to really extreme big. And I was like, that's not the right language. So 69% of people who I did Instagram stories said that they had DEI training, but 0 said that they had training on anti-fat bias. And then I made a post about my findings, and wonderfully, we had some people in the community who said that yes, they have done trainings with anti-fat bias, but it was limited. So I was like, well, that's great news because we want it to be out there, you know. And I think there's a couple of reasons about this. Is that, one, because body size in most locations is not a protected class, you know, like how race and gender and sexual orientation, etc., are protected classes, so that legally you're not allowed to discriminate against people. I mean, people just still do, obviously, and courts still allow that to happen. Remember, like the people who were trying to get a wedding cake for their queer wedding, and they were denied service, and then the Supreme Court was like, yeah, that's cool. That's not illegal, because the people were religious who were making the cake. Anyway, so what I think it is there's no laws, and so I feel like company leaders or DEI leaders, on the whole, and obviously not everyone, are like, well, we don't have to cover this, so we won't. The other side of it is that many people in DEI are really anti-fat. Oh, it pains me to say. You know, when someone's in DEI, I think, I thought, before I got into DEI, I thought people in DEI would be like super, super forward thinking and be on the cutting edge of all diversity things. And guess what? They're not. They're not. It's really, I find it really disturbing. I find it really, really disturbing. And a lot of queer folks have a ton of anti-fat bias. I mean, I've been talking to a lot of DEI people recently, and honestly, they've been the people who've said the most egregious things to me. Honestly. Like, not, listen, when I say egregious, I mean like mildly offensive. But the kind of stuff like that your relative that you don't see very often, you would roll your eyes at. That type of thing. Not like, hey, you fat loser, you know? Not like that. But stuff that is surprising because they're meant to be in that world. But they just haven't been exposed to it, right? And we all have areas that we don't know about, right? Sometimes those same people might be talking to me being like, what the fuck? Vinny knows nothing about ABC. You know, I could be doing the same thing about a different topic that I don't know about, right? Now, what we know about how fat people are treated at work is it is not good. It's not good, right? Just so a kind of overview of how fat people are treated, just in case anyone's listening and they're like, do I have a case that I can convince my manager to get this training from Vinny or someone else, or you know, in get some training in our company? Here's like an overview of stuff. Here's some overview. Okay, I'm going to read some stories. Okay, so quote: the owner of a shoe store tells an employee that they will be fired if they do not lose 35 pounds in 6 weeks. A retirement home seeking a nurse's aide rejects a qualified applicant solely because of their weight and appearance. According to human rights legislation across Canada, such actions by employers are acceptable. This is despite the fact that the objective of human rights legislation is to ensure dignity and respect for all Canadians by protecting them from discrimination. In fact, the two scenarios listed above outline actual events that occurred in Canada. Carolyn Maddox had been a sales clerk at Vogue Shoes in St. Catharines, Ontario for 17 years when the owner of the store told her that she must lose weight or have her employment terminated. Sandra Lynn Davison was a nurse's aide who applied for an open position at a retirement home in Melville, Saskatchewan. Despite her being completely qualified and claiming to be in excellent health, she was rejected from the position for the sole reason that she was fat. Here's a quote from an NPR piece called "The Weight Bias Against Women in the Workforce is Real," that says, "Pat, you think I eat too much?" Ginny Rometty asked her boss, Pat O'Brien at IBM, more than 30 years ago. O'Brien was talking to Rometty about her weight, exhorting her to get in, quote, good physical shape if she wanted to become a high-level executive. Rometty recounts she'd been, quote, chubby as a girl. Gaining and losing weight was a cycle she was all too familiar with. But it was the first time her appearance had come up as an obstacle to her career aspirations. Though it didn't stop her. Rometty went on to become the first female CEO of IBM in its 100-year history. She recounts this incident in her memoir, Good Power, released last month. So this is a story from 2023. She actually gained weight after that conversation, so her weight didn't hinder her own career. But Rometty acknowledges that women are judged more harshly than men on appearance in the workplace, and she laments that nothing has changed. Indeed, study after study over decades has shown that the workplace can impose an unfair weight penalty on women who are seen as fat. By the way, these things that I'm quoting from, I'm going to put the links to everything in the show notes, but I'm editing it as I speak by removing the O words and not telling you, reading out the shitty weight bias stuff that's in there, because all of these fucking articles on, hey, by the way, weight bias is real and it sucks, all have so much fucking weight bias. It's so much anti-fat, because it'll be like, hey, this terrible thing happened. Did you know there's an O-word epidemic and everyone's really fucking fat? We shouldn't be mean to the fatties. I'm like, no, stop it. Yeah, so it was interesting that it says that Rometty says that her weight didn't hinder her own career, but I wonder if it did, but because she still managed to become CEO, she's not perceiving the ways that it did because she got that coveted position. But is she paid less? Did it take her longer to become CEO? Did she have to prove herself even more? I would assume, yeah, especially, and she's a woman, and I don't know what race she is, and if she has other marginalized identities. Gonna presume she's white, because I mean, if it's the first woman CEO in IBM's history, they're probably it's going to be a white woman, right? Because they're not going to probably. Let's just Google it. Let's Google it. Yeah, she's white. She is not fat. Wait on a minute. She's not fucking fat, for fuck's sake. Very slightly chubby. Whatever. Blah, blah, blah. She's talking about it. Okay, let's look at a picture from 1980. No, for fuck's sake. Whatever. She's allowed to not be fat. You know, just, I don't know, the way that that's described makes it sound like she's fat, right? Which she didn't actually say that. She said that she would be a chubby little girl. She didn't say that she was a chubby adult or whatever. Anyway, whatever. She's allowed to be thin. But yeah, she's white. So continuing on with that article. Women are penalised while men are spared. Quote, heavier women tend to earn less, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis said in a 2011 report, which analysed the results of multiple studies on the topic. These penalties have not only increased over the past few decades, but continue to increase as women age. However, men don't seem to face similar weight bias. Some studies have even found that white males seen as small fat actually earn more. However, the wage penalty for women who were seen as small fat was consistent in each study. Economist David Lempert, who worked for the US government for over a decade, found in his analysis that an increase of 10% in a woman's body mass, it decreased her income by 6%. So an increase of 10% in a woman's BMI decrease the income by 6%. This wage cut comes on top of the fact that women already earn 20% less on average than men in the US. So when you add the penalty for being a woman plus the penalty for being fat, for instance, that net penalty is quite large, says Lempert, who worked for the Bureau of Labor Statistics when he did the analysis. Yeah, and as well, what they're missing here is what I just mentioned, is if they are also marginalized in other ways. So if they're a woman, what if they're racialized? What if they're disabled? What if they're neurodivergent? What if they're trans? What if they're et cetera, et cetera? And it's all like layering on top. The weight is just the one thing. And interesting how the men thing, I don't think that it says men are spared. That's not accurate from what I've seen, is that men who are smaller fat are more likely to get into CEO positions than women who are smaller fat. But I don't think that saying them being spared is accurate, because they are still harmed, but maybe less so. Continuing, the bias towards people seen as fat has worsened over time. At Harvard University, a Harvard University study analysed data from over 4 million tests of attitudes between 2007 and 2016. By the way, there's a Harvard IAT test. So just Google Harvard IAT and weight, and you will see you're able to take a test for free to see your bias, your weight bias. I have weight bias towards fat people. That's what it turned out, of like, even like, oh, I love the fatties. Oh, I love them. Anyway, so if you're curious, then you can go and have a little look and get your friends to do it or whatever. And they'll be like, oh God, or maybe you'd be happily surprised. So anyway, the analysis found that while bias towards sexual orientation, race and skin tone decreased in that period, the period was from 2007 to 2016, weight bias increased by 40%, particularly in the early years of the study. It's very disturbing that weight bias is increasing, as the number of people who are experiencing it are also increasing. And that's where they went into, oh my God, there's so many fat people. As women age, the effect of weight on their wealth gets worse, and the NIH published a report that found that the financial net worth of fat people aged 51 to 61 was 40% lower than that of straight-sized peers. The same cohort of women's net worth fell even more to 60% of their counterparts when they were 57 to 67 years of age. No such pattern could be found for men, the report found. Fat women started work with lower wages throughout their careers, received less frequent raises and promotions, leading to an big impact in their cumulative wages as they age. Research also found that women climb higher in the ranks. That as women climb higher in the ranks, it can get worse. Fat female executives in the top echelons can see as much as a 16% wage penalty. Fun times. So a kind of quick roundup of the kind of stats. This is an Instagram post I'm gonna share, so you don't need to worry about making it or whatever, because or remembering it, because it's gonna be on Instagram. Oh. Overall, participants of a study reported negative implicit and explicit attitudes towards fatness, and I believe that fatness is controllable. So this study that we're talking about, the study findings contribute to the evidence that fat people are discriminated against in the hiring process and support calls for policy development. The next study or link of the grim reality of being a female job seeker. There's a website called Fairy God Boss, so it's not a study, it's just data from this website. Asked 500 hiring professionals to view images of women and describe their professional appearance. These women had distinctly different hairstyles, outfits, skin tones, facial expressions, and body types. 20% of the hiring professionals chose to describe the photo of the heaviest looking woman as, quote, lazy, while this adjective was selected less frequently for every other woman pictured. Additionally, 21% described her as unprofessional, and only 18% said that she had leadership potential. Only 15.6% of respondents said that they would consider hiring her. They have a picture. I don't know if it's the picture that they showed. It's of a white woman who looks like a small fat person wearing a grey suit, with slick-backed dark hair, with a white shirt, looks clean, tidy, professional, is smiling. So it's a smaller fat person. So I wonder if they had pictures of larger fat people, what would happen, and what if there are other variables as well, including race, ethnicity, etc., etc. Okay, the next study says fat people are paid between $9,000 and $22,000 less a year than smaller counterparts. This is from a 2010 study. Let's take a quote from it. What may be more surprising is the degree to which employers also seem to have internalized the notion that employees' weight matters. Rowling's comprehensive review suggests that fat individuals are rated as being less desirable as subordinates, co-workers, and bosses, and they are viewed as less conscientious, less agreeable, less emotionally stable, and less extroverted than their straight-sized counterparts. Even though these stereotypes are inaccurate, it appears that in the United States, fat employees are viewed by their employers as lazy and lacking in self-discipline. Rowling's review also revealed that fat women are consistently judged more harshly in the workplace than fat men. Griffin reported that 60% of fat women and 40% of fat men describe themselves as having been discriminated against in the course of employment. Next study says, if a woman was a stone heavier, a stone is 14 pounds. That's a British measurement. It was a stone heavier for no other reason than her genetics. This would lead to having her having an income of £2,940 less. Let's see what that is. 3K Great British pounds to US dollars. 3,700. So if a woman was 14 pounds heavier for no other reason than her genetics, this would lead to her having an income of, what did we say? $3,700 US dollars less per year than a comparable woman of the same height who was 14 pounds lighter. Fun. And that is from a study of 119,000 men and women of British ancestry. What the fuck that mean? British ancestry, does that mean that they're white? Is that a way of saying that white? What? See how fucking bias is baked into studies. Anyway, the 119,000 men and women, no mention of genderqueer people, between the ages of 37 and 73. Fun. According to research, over 40% of people with high body weight report they have experienced weight bias from employers and supervisors. Next study, higher weight folks are less likely to be promoted, be company CEOs, and be in client-facing positions. Now, we do have laws. There's a organization called Fat Legal. It's called Flare Project. You can go find it if you need help because you've been discriminated against at work because of your size. Contact them. But we do have laws, and we have laws in the US. We don't have anything in Canada. Boo. In the US, we've got laws in Binghamton, New York, Madison, Wisconsin, Michigan State, New York City, New York, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, Urbana, Illinois, Washington, D.C. And then we have legal cases or legal precedent from state of California and state of Washington. And so those legal precedent, legal cases would be that there's no official law, but someone has won a discrimination case based on weight, probably under disability protections, because that's one way around it, is to say that weight is disabling for you, and therefore you're not allowed to be legally allowed to be fired or discriminated against or whatever because of that, which is it's grey area, right? Because a lot of times fat folks are not disabled or disabled by their body. So organizations need to get on board, because even though it's not everywhere, it's coming. Many people support getting protections for people for their body size and shape, and that also includes height. It's a popular policy that people want to adopt. And some of these things, like there's, I think the first one was in Michigan State in 1974. And then I think San Fran was from 1991. So some of these are not new, right? And of course, New York happened in the end of 2023. And that was a big thing. And that was supported by Dove and Flair, which I just mentioned, and of course NAFA, which you should go and support NAFA, which is the Fat Legal Rights Organization. We also have ASDA as well. Okay, so I asked people their experiences, right? So this is all, studies and blah, 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 but I wanted to hear some things from humans. And I asked you first your experience of being fat in the workplace, and also I asked you, do you think there's a hope that you would be able to get fat liberation DEI training? Let's answer that one first. People were like, fuck no. Someone said, I'm in my office's DEI committee, and frankly, I'm scared to bring it up. I feel ya. The next person said, our DEI director is entrenched in diet culture. It's never going to be part of the plan. Mm-hmm. I wish, but I don't think it'll ever be accepted as important in workplace DEI spaces. Again, so many people live in bigger bodies, right? So what the fuck is no one talking about this? This is what I wrote in my article, which is on my website, my weightbiastraining.com website. More reassuringly, however, 20.8% of respondents speculated their company would be open to including anti-fat bias in their DEI efforts. 25% said it would be a maybe, but unfortunately 51.4% said it would likely be a no. Okay, so people's experiences, the diet talk. People literally saying fat people are disgusting. I've been waiting for a uniform that fits for over a year. The chairs are not made for fat people. The lunchroom tables and chairs are in a fixed position. My boss openly makes fat jokes. I have to swallow fat-phobic comments reluctantly. It sucks. No support, but plenty of workplace weight loss initiatives. Someone else shared, my bosses demanded after an addiction prevention talk that I bring a kind of certificate from my doctor saying I don't have a food addiction. This kind of talk is for addictions where your senses are impaired, so you can't take proper care of clients. They presumed I was addicted to food because I'm fat. Holy fucking shit. I have no words. If that happened to me, I would be filled with rage. Filled with rage. Can you imagine? Oh, wow. Whew. Those people need some training. Next person says, when the COVID testing centers opened here in Germany and staff were desperately needed, I wanted to help and work there, but I couldn't because they didn't provide protective overalls for fat people. They told me to wear a gown made of permeable fabric in which not all my body would have been protected, while the straight-sized people got the overalls. So I declined because I didn't want to risk my health. You just risk your life. You just risk your life because we can't be bothered to order overalls that fit different body sizes. I wonder as well, like things like, you know, when people are doing x-rays, they wear the lead overalls. And I'm wondering, like, things like that of would they come in bigger sizes? No, I bet you they don't. I bet you they don't. Yeah, and I wonder about other health and safety things. What about people who are working on construction sites and they are in harnesses? I wonder if they ever are denied accessible safety equipment, PPE. There's a story that came out last year, and I was trying to find the resolution to it. It was a flight attendant who was suing Spirit Airlines because she was fired for not fitting in a 4-point harness seatbelt thing. Now, the story was sensationalized by right-wing media who were like, this woman says that she was fired because she's fat, and everyone were like, look at her, she's so ignorant. You know, if you can't fit the seatbelt, then you can't be a flight attendant. But what the real story was, underneath all of the bias that she was getting thrown, was that she was training, and in the training course she sat in this chair and she fitted the 4-point harness. So you know, one that goes from your shoulders and your waist, right, versus just over your lap. She fit it, and she passed she was then on an airplane, and on the airplane she didn't fit it. And apparently they're not allowed to use seatbelt extenders. Why? I don't know. Maybe it makes it less, another point where something could fail, so it's less safe, maybe? I don't know. Maybe they could and they just haven't. So she was escorted off the plane. Fun. Can you imagine? Oh my God. And then she was put on leave, and then she was told, you have 3 weeks to lose enough weight and fit in the harness. And so she tried. 3 weeks later, she still couldn't fit in the harness, so she was fired. What her complaint was not size discrimination, but racial discrimination, because she's black. Another flight attendant who was white had the same issue, but was given longer to lose weight in order to fit into the harness. And so that's the basis of this this lawsuit against Spirit Airlines. The media didn't report. They didn't, you know, the right wing stuff. They were just like, look at her, she's so fucking greedy. Oh, and the comments. Oh, don't look. Don't Google it. Don't go. Don't do it. But that's the real issue there. But it made me think about. Well, she doesn't have, because it depends where she was in the US. She was from the US. I think Spirit Airlines is a US company, right? She doesn't have probably legal protections for body size. And as well, companies would say, well, it's a safety issue, and so we need someone to do the job who has a certain body size. And in some cases that might be legitimate, you know, if someone can't do a job because of how their body operates and it's a core feature of the job, then that makes sense. So this is where right-wing people get their knickers in a twist, is they think that when fat people, what fat people want is for companies to be forced to hire someone who is not able physically to do the job. And that's not what fat folks are looking for. Now, when we say are not able to do the job, I think there's a lot of instances where that person would be able to do the job. Like, for example, this flight attendant, is it a legitimate safety thing that they can't use a seatbelt extender? Then fair enough. But is it? I don't know. Because, you know, a lot of this stuff is based on anti-fatness and other type of bias, right? And is it a core part of the job? You know, and right-wing people really just go to the extreme of like ridiculousness. You know, it's like, you know, someone who was, say, for example, there's a disabled person, and the job was to, I don't know, do something that they weren't physically capable of. You know, do backflips or something. I don't know, be a circus performer. I don't know. But even then, you know, there's other ways that they could do the job, right? You know, I'm just thinking, well, they can do this and that and whatever. But, you know, that's not what's happening, is that a fat person who isn't able to do a certain job, you know, is being like, well, you have to give me the job, because if you don't, it's discrimination. It's when people are perfectly qualified to do the job, are good at their job, and they're being discriminated against because of fatness and nothing else is what it is. And so anyway, if you were having those feelings of like, well, but it sounds like maybe she should have been fired or whatever, you know, we want to take this stuff with a pinch of salt when we're hearing these things from media. Even if it's not right wing, there's still, mainstream media has a lot of bias towards many different people, and we have to kind of unpick it and be like, what's really happening here? Is this true what they're saying? So what to do? I really feel that we're way behind on understanding about fat bias compared to other areas, and I don't agree with the sentiment when people say it's the last acceptable form of discrimination. That's not accurate. That is not accurate. It can feel like that if you are in left-leaning spaces and you're with people who are interested in social justice, that they would happily defend, you know, women's rights. But when it comes to making fun of Donald Trump, they immediately go and say, look, he's fat and he's got a small penis. Which, I mean, that's transphobia and anti-fatness. So it can feel like, well, hang on, in my liberal, left-leaning spaces, people don't make these types of jokes, but they will make these jokes, and they will comment on people's weight and stuff. And absolutely, that's absolutely true. The left has a huge problem with anti-fatness. They also have still, you know, so much bias in other areas that we're probably not picking up on. But I think what people are referring to when they say it's the last acceptable form of discrimination is that in moderate or right-leaning spaces, people happily make in left-leaning spaces make those fat jokes. But anyway, so what I'm saying is, in right and moderate in places, they're making fat jokes. They're making jokes about everyone. They are excluding everyone, not just fat people. So I think that's where that saying comes from, is we see in our spaces, our more liberatory spaces, that people are cool with anti-fatness. But in the general population, anti-fatness is not the last acceptable form of discrimination, because they're out bigoting for the best of them. I mean, oh man. They are, just right now, like all the anti-trans bills that have been passed, right? That's just one example of how committed they are to discriminating against queer trans people. You know, they're not creating anti-fat bills, right? We're not seeing bills coming out saying fat people are not allowed to work in this community, whereas we're seeing bills coming out saying drag queens are not allowed to work in this community, right? So we want to remember that anti-fat bias is a problem. However, it's not the only problem, and it doesn't trump all other types of oppression. And it's all interconnected anyway. I mean, you know, anti-fatness is anti-blackness, is ableism, is classism, is capitalism. It's all interconnected. So just a kind of a little thing there of, just in case, you know, people are saying that. And I used to fucking say that too. I don't know, maybe like 6, 7, 8 years ago. I remember putting a comment on Facebook, and then someone said, actually, it's not. And I was like, oh shit, you're right. You're right. Yeah, and not to diminish how awful anti-fatness is, and how we're so behind. We don't have laws to protect us. Ugh. Whereas other communities have laws to protect them, but those laws are, you know, being scraped back, and people are breaking those laws anyway. So, you know, we all need to be free. We all need to be free. So anyway, if you are a leader in a company and you might want to bring anti-fat bias training to your workplace, hi, I can do that. I like doing fun, energetic, non-shaming type training is my thing. And I mean, shit, in a few weeks, I'm going to be doing a training that's just 15 minutes long. It's a great idea. As call center has, it's struggle to get people off the phones, right? Because it's kind of a pressurized, you know, you need to be on the phone and every minute is accounted for type thing. Anyway, so they have 15 minutes for learning every week, which I think is great. And so I'm doing a 15 minutes on anti-fatness, and so yeah, it'd be fun. So anyway, I can do something short or something more in depth. Also training DEI teams, and actually that reminds me, shit, I can't believe I almost forgot about this. I have a new training coming up, which is a training just from me. Not just from me, it's from me. Dismantling anti-fat bias in the workplace, a training for leaders and DEI professionals. So this is for people who probably know stuff about diversity, know a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but want to be like really knowledgeable about the anti-fat bias side of things. It's on the 12th of June. That's 12 p.m. PST, 3 p.m. EST. It's 2-hour training. It's like a 90-minute training, 30-minute Q&A. Replay available, 97 US doll hairs, or 2 payments of 49. If you would like a 50% off price that contributes towards economic justice, just email me and I'll give you a code. Yeah. Hiya! So, you can even send it if you've got a DEI person that's at your company. You can just send the link to them and be like, "Oh, this looks good. Go do it. Go do it." Or if you want to come along, that's cool as well. Yeah. So I want to make it accessible, because a lot of times these trainings can be really expensive for people. Yeah. So there you have it. I'll put the link for that in the show notes. I'm doing it now. And if you want to follow me on my go to my work, the Weight Inclusive Consulting website, then I'll put the link for that in the show notes as well. If you appreciate this fat content and would like to contribute towards the costs of making the podcast, go to Ko-fi, Ko-fi, Fierce Fatty. The link will be in the show notes, and links to all of the studies I've mentioned today. Like I said, like here's another study, but I'm going to link to all of those studies as well, so that you have that, and those articles that I read from too. Heads up, there's loads of anti-fatness and all of the stuff, all of the studies. They all use O words. They all are on the kind of like, don't be mean to fat people, but they are gross. LOL, you know. They're on that train, so just a heads up on that. You know, you're not going to die if you look at them, but just a heads up that there is bias there. All right. If you've got any questions about ADHD stuff, I'm not an expert because I've just found out about this stuff. But if you're curious about so far the process or whatever, send me a DM on the Instagrams or whatever, or send me an email. I'm wearing contact lenses today for the first time in like 10 years. It's so weird. If I was putting in, when I was putting in the contact lenses, I felt very silly because I was being a baby. I wasn't being baby. I was just being a normal, sensitive human and being like, oh my God, close my eyes. It was very hard to get in. It took about 10 minutes. Anyway, so look at me with my magic eyeballs. Lasers can shoot from them now because I've got these contacts in. I just wanted to wear contacts because the bridge of my nose can get sore from my glasses. I think it's from the style of glasses that I wear or something, but I can get like these, not welts, but pressure patches. I'm sure you know if you're a glasses wearer, on my nose, and I want to give them a rest. So, but these contact lenses feel weird. Anyway, whatever. I'm going to stop talking. You don't need to know about my contact lens life. Okay. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Remember, you're worthy. You always were. You always will be. And stay fierce, fatty. Bye-bye.
Perfect.